Alright, Shalom. First and foremost, want to begin this lesson by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shah, Wahar Rakah Kodash, which in the ancient Hebrew tongue would be the correct names of the Heavenly Father, His beloved Son, and the Holy Spirit. Also want to give double honors to the head apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom, much due honors and respect to the sincere brethren out there that's also laboring in His work. So yeah, the topic of this lesson right here is going to be centered around the fact that Esau, the so-called white man, is preparing to wage war against Jacob, which would consist of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And it's all going to be done under the banner of these devils establishing their new world order. Now, when you consider the whole idea of the new world order, it's nothing more than a fancy, polished up way of saying Esau trying to get his birthright back, man. Alright? Now, the bridge to New World Order, if you will, is going to come in the form of martial law, which when you go into that word martial, it means warlike. So another way of saying martial law is warlike law. And it all makes sense, especially if you've been paying attention to these devils, man. All right? They've been passing laws and legislations to justify coming up against Israel. Why? Because the true enemy of the so-called white man is you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. They try to set this false narrative like, the terrorists over in the Middle East, these different regimes, whether it was Al-Qaeda or, the Taliban, as if they was the enemy of the U.S. government. But the real enemy and the ones who they have in their crosshairs is you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And to go to the source of this friction, look no further than the scriptures, man. All right? It all goes back to Jacob and Esau. The so-called white man versus you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Well, this friction goes back to the womb. You're literally natural born enemies, man. All right? And you see the momentum being shifted over to Israel. What I mean is, when you go back to maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, where you had these different terrorist groups who was painted as, the main threat to America. Well, you notice that momentum is being shifted toward the tribes. And of late, you see through the spirit, this whole black identity extremeness has been thrown around. Well, that's Esau, putting the pieces together so they can come after Jake. And in this lesson, I wanted to highlight the fact that this is nothing new. All right? Now, I got a little information right here I'm going to read through. And of course, we're going to filter it through the scriptures. Now it says, Nero persecute the Christians, 64 AD. Now, if you know anything about Nero, he was a Roman Caesar. In other words, he was a damn Edomite. He was a so-called white man. All right? Now, around the time of 64 AD, he started the persecution of the Christians. Now, the Christians would be you Israelites. All right? And this spilled over into the time of 70 AD. And if you know anything about that history, that was a very dark period in history for the Israelites, all right? Which a lot of these historians coined as the Roman onslaught, while people was chased out of Jerusalem into mainly the interiors of Western Africa, the west coast of Africa, and all throughout Europe, to escape the siege. Now, it says a generation after the death of Christ, what they have here, in Hebrew that word would be Mashiach. Mashiach. It says Christianity had reached Rome in the form of an obscure offshoot of Judaism popular among the city's poor and destitute. Yeah, and basically they going off with that Judaism, you know. That's a religion. That would be considered religion. If you do any research into Judaism, I think they say it's like the 10th largest religion, which that eliminate them from being Israelites because the scriptures tell you how Israel cannot be numbered. They'll be as the sand of the sea. And furthermore, Israel, Yasha, is a certain stock, you know, of a certain lineage of the stock of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not a religion. So they going off right there. So back then they was not, that wasn't the term, all right? These was what they call Christians or Mashiachim, all right? The anointed ones, the Israelites. So it says, members of this religious sect spoke of the coming of a new kingdom and a new king. See? And this is happening today. Matter of fact, let me get a quick precept. The book of Ecclesiastes, first chapter, the 9th verse, it said, "A thing that have been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." Yes, so the things that happened in the past is playing all over again, which that proves reincarnation in itself. Because the same players back then is back today. And they just repeating the same things they did back then. So when it says members of this religious sect spoke of the coming of a new kingdom and a new king, this is happening today. Are we not speaking of the kingdom being ushered in and a new king reigning on the planet Earth, which is going to be our Lord Yahweh Shai? All right. It says these views provoked suspicion among the Jewish authorities who rejected the group and fear among the Roman authorities who perceived these sentiments as a threat to the empire. Yeah, and you're going to have that today. You got these higher ups, these authorities who perceive what we teach as a threat to this current system, this current structure. All right? And you got to remember, the ancient Romans would be these so-called white people today. So back then, you had certain men amongst the poor and destitute who taught of a new kingdom and a new king, and this actually rubbed the Roman authorities the wrong way to the point where they perceived this to be a threat to the empire, man. All right? So you got to expect this to happen again, and we see it. All right? It says, in the summer of 64, Rome suffered a terrible fire that burned for 6 days and 7 nights, consuming almost 3/4 of the city. The people accused the Emperor Nero for the devastation, claiming he set the fire for his own amusement. In order to deflect these accusations and placate the people, Nero laid blame for the fire on the Christians. Yeah, and this is in history, man. So really this had the elements of a false flag. Nero burned the city down himself and he blamed it on the Christians, and this is the MO of the so-called white man. For an example, when you consider 9/11, everybody know that that was a false flag. That was an inside job. But they blamed it on those Arabs, and you see, not long afterward, they went up into that region, man, and waged war. So this is how these devils operate, all right? It says, the emperor ordered the arrest of a few members of the sect who under torture accused others until the entire Christian populace was implicated and became fair game for retribution. See? And that's what these devils is going to do today. They're going to apprehend certain guys, they're going to torture them, and they're going to make them make statements that they're going to use against the Israelites as a whole. Because they understand that what we teaching is not in harmony with what they want. Okay? It's not in agreement with their new world order. For an example, this whole RFID being implicated. Well, these devils in their agenda was to have you people chipped, I believe, in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it was 2007. You can Google it, where NBC did a news story on it. I believe the news story was in 2007, and I believe they planned to have people chipped around 2017 or something like that. All right, don't quote me on it. But I said all that to say this. It's no coincidence that the Spirit of the Lord raised up the apostles and put the Spirit on them to come on to YouTube in the summer of 2007. And they was pushing the idea of that RFID chip being the mark of the beast. And that actually upset the plans of the elites. See, you got to remember these devils, they deal under the shroud of deception. All right? So this word is disrupting the plans of Esau. Just like back then in ancient Rome, they perceived the idea of a new king and a new kingdom to be a threat to their empire. So there's nothing new under the sun, all right? And I believe through the Spirit, these devils, they're going to set up something dramatic where they can place the blame on the Israelites, man. All right? I mean, that's not far-fetched, because this is the MO of these devils, man. You see it when they want to go up in these different lands for their resources. They'll set the narrative, and they'll create the leader of that country to be a boogeyman. You know, they'll say this guy's bombing his own people with chemical warfare. He poisoning their water. He's a tyrant. So we got to go up in there and bring democracy, you know? Well, you think these devils is going to shy away from what they do? No, they're going to do that with us, man. All right? Just like Nero did. It could be in the form of some false flag, you know, because pretty much they can't just hang their hat on saying that it's just saying that we're a threat. They're going to have to set up a scenario where they could place us at the scene of the crime, so to speak. All right? And again, this is how this devil get down. This is Revelation, the 12th chapter. And starting at the 10th verse, it says, I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our power and the power of his Mashiach. All right? For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our power day and night. And who is the accuser of our brethren? Esau, the so-called white man. And how is he going to ultimately accuse us? By setting up different false flags and different narratives. Because the American citizens are shook, man. All they got to do is hear the word terrorist, and they're going to say, oh, you got to do something about this. And that's a psychological ploy that these damn elites have implemented. See? So if they associate us with being terrorists, then pretty much that's a form of them accusing us. And they are already doing it, you see, with this black identity extremists. All right? Verse 11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Yeah, so you're going to have martyrs. Everything is going to be repeated, just like we read the information of what was documented back in 70 AD, or should I say 64 AD, man. Okay, really, which it started in like in 64 AD, but it spilled all the way into like 73 AD. You know, where these devils came down on Israel with great wrath. Verse 12, therefore rejoice ye heavens and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he have but a short time. And that's where we at in this process. These devils don't have a lot of time, because they like, look, we, our agenda, was to have these people chipped and enslaved, you know, so we can move forward with our new world order. But these Israelites, they have came out and they have exposed us. Now we 10 years behind. So desperation is going to kick in, and when all else fail, what's going to happen? These devils are going to revert to their attribute, their instincts, which is what? The sword. All right? Genesis 27, Genesis chapter 27, and starting at verse 38, and Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing? My father bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above, and by thy sword shalt thou live. Yeah, so this is the way Esau is going to rationalize things out, man. They're not going to sit down and diplomatically work nothing out with us, man. They're going to go back to their instincts, their blessing. See, and by thy sword thou shalt live, and thou shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, thou shalt break his yoke from off his neck. Verse 41, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. See? So even just the average Joe six-pack, white boy, he don't really know why he hates you so much. But we know that this goes back to your forefather, man. It's in your DNA. It's genetically in you. It's woven in your fabric, all right? It says, and Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. And that's where we at, all right? So yeah, I just wanted to go into that, Lord willing. It was edifying. Until the next time I say shalom.